I call this the Deer Hair Chubby. It's one of my favorite flies to fish. Stay tuned and I'll show you how to use it to catch fish too. I'm tying it on a Mustad 3/0 hook. I really love this hook. I love the angle at which the curve comes down. I love the gap between the point and the shank of the hook. It is perfect, and I feel like my hookup ratio is really, really good, especially when I'm targeting and getting bigger bites from larger bass. So you're going to take a Marabou feather. I'm using white or tan. I can't really tell, but it looks maybe more like a tan feather. And just essentially choose a feather that corresponds to the color that you're using for the type and color of fur that you're using. I prefer to use antelope fur, a lot like a Llanolope fly, which this is kind of a copy of that fly. But it's really hard for me to find antelope fur at my local fly shops, so I usually just end up with a lot of deer hair. Also, deer hair is really inexpensive, but can still tie essentially the same pattern. So I tie this with deer hair for the most part. You're going to take some crystal flash. What I do is I cut it in half, and then I cut it in half again, turning it into fourths. You're going to take 2 strands and wrap them on either side of the hook so that you can balance out the crystal flash on either side. And then you're going to take 2 strands and put them on top. When you get your deer hair, this is the belly hair of the deer. And you just want to make sure that you get a really, really good clump. You can ask the person at the store, hey, can I open this up and just make sure it's good? Can you make sure this is what I need for spinning deer hair? And a lot of times they'll let you if they're friendly. But if you don't get good hair, it makes it a lot harder. This is a really nice cut of hair. So what I'm doing, because you're starting at the back of the hook, there's a hook point down there, so it's really hard to tie in fur below it. And the way that I navigate around that problem is that I tie on the fur on either side of the shank and try to work it down with my fingers below the hook to try and balance it out. Usually I do have some imbalance below, and that's just me needing to learn how to adapt and do it better. But tell you what, this fly still catches tons of fish, even if it's not perfectly balanced. I usually put 4 clumps, 3 to 4 clumps on each segment of the fly. So I'll tie some on the side that we're facing, let's call that the left-hand side of the hook. I tie it on like the bottom left-hand side of the hook. Then I'll flip it over and tie it on the bottom right-hand side of the hook. And then I'll tie one on top. And then I'll put like an extra one anywhere that I think it needs it. That way you've got 3 to 4 segments that completely wrap up the hook so that it's really, really tight and balanced. And after you do like 3 or 4 clumps at a time, you're going to push back the fur either with your fingernails, or like a lot of people will use the tube from like a Bic pen. Sometimes I use that, sometimes I don't. In this video, I think I just use my hands. But again, for this fly, this is not going to be the super crisp, professional grade, like looks like it's been cut with a laser beam fly that you see on Instagram that some of these guys are tying that are like works of art. This fly is a tool. I will make it look really nice at the end by adding eyes and resin and stuff, but it's pretty rough cut. I'm going to tie in some silly legs here. I'm just using whatever I've got in my grab bag that somewhat matches the color of the fly. Some people will use like some hot legs. I could see people using like there's a type of silly leg that goes from white to orange. That would work really well there because it's like a hot spot kind of deal that fish will definitely like. But you want to make sure that you're getting enough of the deer hair up close enough to the eye of the hook to where the piece of foam that you're going to tie in won't have too much gap. You want it to be just a little bit too much so that it's snug when you tie in your foam. And what I do next is I cut my foam out, which is from this little cylinder. I get these off of Amazon. You can buy them at fly shops. They're not too expensive, but you'll get a better deal if you get them off of like Amazon. I'm using the medium size cylinders. And you could use a bodkin to do the point, but I always use scissors because the eye of the hook is so big that a bodkin hole is not big enough. And I want to make sure that the hole is big enough to easily glide over the eye of the hook, because when you get glue on there, you want to make sure that it doesn't stick and that you're not struggling to put it on. Because if you are, it'll make your foam go into a goofy shape, which sucks. And right here, I'm actually tying thread back on because I noticed that there was an imbalance of fur lacking on like the top left-hand side of the shank. And so I'm tying in one more little clump to make sure it's more even, which if I was more professional, maybe I would just tie another fly and not use this video, but I got limited time. So I tied in that extra little bit to make sure that there's enough fur between where I think the foam should go and how much foam I've got. I'm going to whip finish this, and then I'm going to put a dollop of glue after making sure that that foam head is going to fit without struggling to get it on. You want to make sure that it's easy to get on. And also put a little extra glue than just what's going to fit in the hole of it, so that some of it will touch, not too much, but you want a little bit of it to touch the hair that's directly behind it, but not so much that it'll splay out into the tips of the hair. That way it's not messing up your scissors and razor blade when you're cutting it. I'm taking my stainless steel super sharp razor here, and I'm cutting two flat surfaces on either side of the cylinder, because that's where I'm going to put some eyes. And right here I'm attempting to grab the silly legs with a clothespin, because one of the things that I hate about tying this fly and that takes so long is when you're using the razor blade to actually cut the hair, you have to be really careful about not cutting off those silly legs, because it's really easy to lose sight of them and to forget where they are. And then you'll look up and you're like, ah, damn it, I just cut the silly leg off. And 20 minutes ago I tied them on, and now I'm at this stage of the fly, and now it's just going to be a legless fly, because you don't want it to have one leg. Regardless, it would still catch fish, but if you're going to do it, just make sure that you're paying attention to where those legs are, because it's such a pisser when you accidentally cut them off. So I'm coming in here with just my long scissors to trim it up. A lot of people would say that this is heresy for making a deer hair spun fly, because when you see those just super buttery crisp flies that like they're literal works of art, those guys are using only the razor blade, but that's the reason they're able to do that, is because of how much tighter packed those other flies are. And I can't get my hair that tight. I don't have enough practice doing it, but I still just am obsessed with this specific fly, and the way that I tie it works great for me. So if you think it's stupid, let me know in the comments. If you think it's great, let me know in the comments. But I'd actually love some feedback on how anyone, like if you're watching this and you're really good at stacking hair, tell me where I can get better, because I definitely want to get there at some point. But until then, this is the way that I like to work with the body. You're going to be really make sure you're careful not to cut off the marabou in the back while you're trimming. But the nice thing is you usually miss it, because the tips of your scissors don't usually cut quite as much of the marabou when it's just barely touching them. Next, you're going to get your eyes. I get these off of Amazon. They're just called 3D yellow eyes. And I think I get packs of 500 for like $19. It's a really good value. I'm using I think these are 8mm on there. 8 and 5 are usually the size that I use. You just need one tiny little dollop of glue. Don't overdo it, otherwise they're going to stick to your fingers. If they do stick to your fingers, it's fine. You'll leave a little fingerprint. But then the cool part is you can come in with this resin, and even if there's like a little fingerprint of glue left on the fly, this resin will fill in the crack, and it will almost be invisible to be seen. And the nice thing about this resin, the reason why I do it is, one, it makes the fly look way better. Two, it makes it way more robust. I'm throwing these flies underneath docks, off of rocks, close to trees, and one of the first parts of the fly that always breaks off are going to be the eyes. And so by putting it inside resin, it's going to kind of complete that cylinder shape that the foam had to begin with, but two, it just makes it really tough and it makes it look really good. So you put on that thick resin, and then you're going to follow up with this is called thin, and this is kind of like the polish that goes on, and it's almost like cheating. It makes it look so good. But it's crazy to me how these eyes and the resin make it come together to make it actually look like something, coming from something that was so rough just like seconds ago. from cutting it with scissors. But stay tuned, and I'll show you how to catch bass and perch with it on Town Lake in Austin, Texas. So I'm on Lady Bird Lake or Town Lake here in Austin, Texas. Summertime, later in the day, and I hear a big old splash behind me. Turn my head and see some splashes. It's bass that are chasing some bait fish directly under the Mopac Bridge. So I instantly cast with my back cast over there and hook up right away with this nice little bass. The fight felt great. I always use this fly on my 3-weight rod if I have it with me, mainly because I love this rod. It's a TFO rod. I can cast it really, really far. And the fish that I'm getting are usually, sometimes I'll get a big fish, like 3-4 pounds. But for the most part, it's going to be smaller than 3 pounds. And so it's a lot more fun of a fight if you're using the 3-weight rod. And for me, I make my own leaders, and my leaders are usually 4 to 6 pound test. So you have to be really ginger when you're reeling in these fish, because otherwise they'll just break your line off. But caught this bass. It was probably the best fish of the day. It's really fun when you hear it happen, you change directions, and then you get to target it, cast it, and get the hookup that you're just hoping for. So that was really a magical moment. This is pretty much in the exact same spot. I hook into a smaller bass on the exact same fly, and the way that I'm fishing it is usually when I cast it, I get hit within 1/1000, 2/1000, 3/1000. Then I'll leave my fly completely still right after it lands. But if I don't get a hit right away, then I'm going to strip it slowly a couple of times. And if I don't get something within about 15 seconds, I'm just going to keep drifting down the water using my my trolling motor or the wind, and just keep hitting every 5 to 10 feet of bank. And especially if you've got like a Tenkara rod, I need more distance on this boat, but if I'm in like my tube boat, then I'm going to be using a Tenkara rod so that I can just get tons of casts in. And I've actually found that I catch more fish when I'm Tenkara rod fishing, because instead of doing line management, you simplify it by just constantly casting all the time. Either way, super fun catching fish with this 3-weight rod. I think I caught like 9 or 10 fish, most of which were perch like this one, but still, it's a super fun fight. If you liked this video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and have a great day.